Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Inventing Latinos, a new story of American racism, by Laura E. Gomez, narrated by Joana Garcia. Introduction. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, age 30, represents New York's 14th congressional district, including parts of the Bronx and Queens. The district's population, just short of 700,000, is 50% Latino, with whites, Asian Americans, and African Americans each composing 12 to 18%. AOC, as she is known, is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America and has captured national attention as the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. She describes her race as reflecting many different identities. I am the descendant of African slaves. I am the descendant of indigenous people. I am the descendant of Spanish colonizers. That doesn't mean I'm black, that doesn't mean I'm native, but I can tell the story of my ancestors. AOC was born in the Bronx to a Puerto Rican father, also born in the Bronx, and a mother born in Puerto Rico, who said AOC grew up speaking her mind in family dinner conversations. In another interview, she said, "We are all of these things and something else all at once. We are Boricua," using a Spanish word to describe the island's indigenous Taino people that has long been embraced as a countercultural signifier of Puerto Rican solidarity and political awakening. Congressman Ben Ray Lujan, 48, represents New Mexico's 3rd Congressional District, spanning northern New Mexico from Santa Fe to the Colorado border, west to Arizona, and east to Texas. The district's 700,000 people are 40% Latino, nearly 20% Native American, and 36% white. Lujan was born in the village of Nambe, located in between two of the district's several Pueblo nations. In the context of New Mexico's racial demography, Lujan's ancestors include the Spanish colonizers, Mexican settlers, and indigenous peoples who until recently vastly outnumbered Anglos, as non-Hispanic whites are called there. "My grandparents made a place for themselves in New Mexico before it was a state," he told delegates at the 2016 Democratic National Convention, invoking his paternal grandfather, a sheep herder, and his maternal grandfather, who became a Union carpenter after returning from World War II with a bronze medal. Speaking more obsequiously about race, he said, "I know I might not look like your typical member of Congress. I haven't really gotten the bolo tie look to catch on." The reference was ostensibly to his large turquoise and silver bolo tie, but it hinted at his brown skin, his accent, typical of northern New Mexican Latinos. In New Mexico politics, questions of race are never far from the forefront, as a state GOP press release in December 2019 showed. It criticized New Mexico's 3 congressional delegates, Lujan and 2 women of color, for their votes in favor of the articles of impeachment. "This is why we must all work hard to change the complexion of our congressional delegation." Lujan fired back. "As a Hispanic representative of a majority-minority state, I have a responsibility to speak out forcefully when racism and dog whistles are used to further political attacks against people who look like me." Despite their different registers, AOC and Lujan represent Latinx politicians who came of age when the singularity of Latinos, as distinct from non-Hispanic whites and non-Hispanic blacks, to use those ubiquitous bureaucratic terms, is legible on the national stage. Previous generations of Latinos might have emphasized their national origin. AOC as Puerto Rican and Lujan as Mexican-American, and may well have adopted an additional identity as white or black. Charlie Rangel, the longtime New York congressman who was born in 1930, anglicized his Spanish surname. His father was Puerto Rican, and founded the Congressional Black Caucus. Born 2 years before Rangel, Republican Congressman Manuel Lujan, no relation to Ben Ray, had a 25-year political career. He spoke Spanish fluently and was born at San Ildefonso Pueblo, as were his parents, yet insisted he was white. Rangel and the elder Lujan came of age when racial identity in America was a dichotomous choice, at least in the public sphere, where one had to choose white or black. This is not to claim people had less complicated identities in the past, or to deny how racism constrained their choices. It is to acknowledge, however, how utterly different things are today. Few would contest the multiplicity of racial identities and racial categories in contemporary America. It is especially the case that Americans have more choices about how to present their difference, however they define it, how they choose to convey or veil their identities in particular situations. Certainly, it has always been the case that race was situational, but the possibilities for public recognition of one's identity are, today, much more open than even 40 years ago, when I was in high school. Today, the United States has moved from a two-category racial hierarchy, whites over blacks, or even white over non-white, to a multi-race hierarchy in which whites continue to be dominant in terms of wealth, political power, and ideology. Inventing Latinos interrogates the how and why of Latinx identity becoming a distinctive racial identity. To say Latinos have different choices individually and collectively is to underline how race reflects two intersecting vectors. On the one hand, one can assert, and so essentially choose, a racial identity. But on the other, racial identities are given to us by others. We might make a particular choice, but it could be disregarded by anyone, from a stranger to a police officer deciding whether or not you belong in a particular neighborhood, to a government clerk filling out race on a death certificate because she is uncomfortable asking next of kin the question. In other words, one's choice is constrained in many ways, just as it is for other identities. But to accurately describe racial identity as situational does not fully capture the social dynamic at the heart of this book, which has as much to do with how racial conventions and racism make people's race less malleable than others. It is equally the case that not everyone's opinion of your race is equally relevant. The cop's opinion matters more than the stranger's, although the latter might be a gateway to the former. So far, these examples have focused on individual interactions, or what sociologists call the micro-level. This book's concern is mostly with two additional levels, the meso-level and the macro-level, and with how the three levels interact together. For instance, if we consider an institutional context like schooling, we know there is a particular set of ideas about race and racial classification, though, to be sure, these ideas vary and circulate in different ways. We know that it is routine in the United States for teachers, parents, and school administrators to talk about race in a demographic register, say the makeup of the school or community, as well as a cultural register. Most often, the latter treats race in coded ways that value a colorblind notion of race. The notion that race is irrelevant to the content of one's character, viewpoints, and the like. the most abstract level and sometimes the hardest one to pin.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?